Trade Unions in Transformation 4.0, or TWEET in short, is an FES project that aims to understand workers' agency in digital capitalism. We have examined how trade unions and new organizations of workers build workers' power to confront and shape the emerging new world of work. With the TWEET project, FES aims to contribute to workers and trade union strategies and offers cooperation for union transformation. Let's turn to the riders on the storm and the transport workers in the platform economy. This is an exceptional session as we have many authors presenting. We will look into global protests of platform workers, and then we will hear about trade unions and workers' organizations, fights to secure their rights in Argentina, in Belgium and the Netherlands, Indonesia, Uganda, and Korea, in that same order.
The expansion of businesses of platform companies, the so-called honeymoon period of platform work, that is, big bonuses, lots of incentives, and flexible work hours, among others, gradually faded away. Trapped in bogus or disguised self-employment that takes them out of labor protection, of labor laws, platform workers all over the world are increasingly experiencing a worsening of their working conditions in terms of long working hours, diminishing incomes and incentives, exposure to occupational risks and hazards, and intensified labor control via algorithms, what we call the invisible boss. But platform workers have collective agency, so that in recent years, we have witnessed a rise in labor protests in platform work, particularly in the transport and food delivery sector. One of the papers of our TWEET 4.0 project draws from the Leeds Index of platform labor protests, which covers the dynamics of labor protest in platform-mediated work in 36 countries. Vera, could you tell us some of the key findings of your research or database on platform labor unrest, particularly in terms of the main features of labor protests of platform workers in food delivery and the extent to which the bottom-up initiatives, grassroots unions, and mainstream unions mobilize workers?
We were looking at different type of actions that workers were undertaking, and we did see from our global database where we were looking into actions against platforms in food delivery, and we were covering 19 companies and 60 countries. The most widespread action that we have seen is actually strikes and lock-offs, followed by demonstrations and fewer cases of legal actions and very few cases of institutionalization, like establishing a works council or negotiating a collective agreement. Most of these actions have few participants and are of short duration, with some exceptions. So in 16% of the cases, we did see more than 100 workers involved, up to 1,000 workers. The majority of events lasted less than 24 hours, but in some cases, actions did continue for 3 days. We have seen considerable regional variety. Strikes and lock-offs mainly happened in Asia and Europe. Demonstrations were most widespread in South America, and legal action mostly occurred in North America and Australia. A quarter of the incidents and protest events that we have seen addressed multiple companies. A quarter had cross-local coordination, and a fifth included workers from multiple companies. And I think this is a really interesting result in terms of forming associational power, that we do see coordinated action among the workers. So you could see there is a kind of concentration of protest against a couple of companies. And the interesting thing for us was particularly that the main grievance that workers did bring forward was about pay. So that was the kind of predominant cause for action. which is a kind of traditional cause of action for trade unions, which made us think that probably the kind of world of work in the digital and non-digital world are not so different, if that's the kind of same grievance that is most important to workers by far off. So that was in 63% of the cases, while we also saw protests regarding the employment status and the working conditions and health and safety, but that was always less than a quarter or a fifth of the cases. The impact of COVID-19 and the pandemic, we did see an increase in protest in 2020 related to health and safety. So that is a clear result, and that is occurred mainly in South America, where workers were, as delivery workers, considered to be essential workers, but at the same time being exposed to higher risks without any kind of security. So they were fighting for healthcare and for higher pay, accommodating the higher risk they are taking. And this has led to some interesting results. So we could say we had something like a sector-wide strike in South America, which maybe is the kind of first real example of an international sector-wide strike in the platform economy.
Laura, in the Argentina case, you described, along with your co-authors, how food delivery workers of the platform Rappi have organized and formed their own trade union, held a digital strike, which is the first in Latin America, and are now fighting for institutional recognition. So my first question is, what was the decisive moment that led to the workers to organize?
Brought about a change in the algorithm where the order annotation algorithm, and this then led to a protest of the workers. Why? Because the interpretation of the workers is that they usually incentivize the onboarding of new workers, and they become integrated, and those that have a higher seniority are not allocated any orders. And this then led to a movement between the workers that kept working for the platform for quite a long time. And we come to an important issue. They should be progressively incorporated as voluntary and independent workers for the platform. And this meant a leap in terms of the need and identity of the workers in order to identify them as independent employment status through the platform. The relationship between losing of the independence, their professional independence, and a lowering of the salary because of the audio allocation algorithm change, this then led to the fact that the platform basically controls and stipulates all the conditions in which their workers have to work. They don't recognize their labor rights, and they don't recognize this independent relationship. So they become organized with the help of different networks. This, of course, is an important issue. The associational power, the use of social media groups, WhatsApp groups that were established in the course of the activity, not only in some of the urban spaces where the activity has gathered, but as well in other groups or spaces. For example, in the migrant population, because most of them are actually migrants. But to come back to the organization, how this process was initiated. The platform workers come together on the public spaces and the so-called plazas in Buenos Aires, and they organize assemblies and meetings simultaneously, and they decide to launch the first digital strike. And this implied that they will accept an order and then not fulfill the order. And starting from this digital strike, the rate was, or the rate of orders was increased, and this would then have a positive impact of the workers. And then starting from that, they realized a whole series of different activities, more formal structural formation over the movement. And this is when they elected representatives that might have a closer contact with the different platform workers. So we had a body of representatives that went to, for example, to Rappi, the platform company, in order to present their claims against the change of the order allocation algorithm and the rise of the rate. And those representatives selected or voted on during those meetings, representatives of the workers, they then would be the representatives of the worker, and they were laid off, traditionally speaking. And this anti-union conduct would then lead to the motivation of the workers to institutionalize themselves. So they applied for the forming of an association before the Ministry of Education. Or I do think that it was a good strategy to confront the ministry and present the application to form a union. This would not have happened if they would not have faced the problems beforehand. And that means, I think they could be covered institutionally, which would be the immunity to form a union. And then the workers had the possibility to protest and to organize strikes. So
Argentina case, as presented by Laura, as well as the other cases in our panel, underscored how the misclassification of platform workers as individual contractors is being used by platform companies to deny workers employment rights and their right to organize into a union. In the case of the app-based food delivery riders in Belgium and the Netherlands, there have been relative success in organizing, bargaining, and legal action. What were the key factors that facilitated the organizing process of the couriers collective in Belgium and the riders union in the Netherlands? And what made the workers decide to link up or build a coalition with mainstream unions early on the process of organizing?
When it comes to the factors that facilitated the success, I think first one is that there is a couriers collective in Belgium and a riders union in the Netherlands themselves. Both are informal online digital communities using, for instance, Telegram and WhatsApp or Facebook. And they provide spaces where the couriers can interact with each other about their employment terms and conditions. The Couriers Collective was established in 2015. And in first instance, it was established to exchange about the enjoyment of cycling, and not so particularly on a focus on socioeconomic issues. And this has changed when protests rise against the employment practices of a local platform called Take Eat Easy. Organizing in digital communities was initially also indirectly promoted by Deliveroo via introducing a hierarchy among the couriers via so-called lead riders. So in both countries, Belgium and the Netherlands, there existed pre-existing structures or networks for social interaction among the couriers and for stimulating the development of a collective identity, which then could be combined with offline social identification processes, as the couriers have, of course, the ability to meet in person in the city center. This is where the restaurants are located. The second factor is for stimulating the organizing process of careers was the decision of Deliveroo to change the employment relationship of the careers in Belgium and the Netherlands, and also in some other European countries. This relationship changed from being generally employed to an independent contractor status. And this unilateral decision has fueled grievances and feelings of algorithmic adjustments among the careers. It was feared that their employment terms and conditions would worsen via a piece rate system. At least this was a feeling shared among a critical mass of careers. And the only one to blame for this was Deliveroo itself. So this has led to the industrial action. Maybe a third factor was there was a belief among the key people within both the careers collective and the riders union that trade unions could help them. There was no outspoken anti-union attitudes among the careers. So in contrast to some other countries, the careers themselves contacted the unions, and unions could offer them logistical help by providing meeting rooms, uh, helping them in legal and giving legal advice for instance, understanding their contracts. And unions have, of course, also experience in mobilizing and organizing workers. And last but not least, they have the financial resources. So to sum up, there was a structure in terms of digital communities. There was an opportunity due to the decision of Deliveroo to change the contractor status. And there was also agency in the form of the combined effort of the careers and unions. I think the advantages for the unions is maybe first one is that platform-based food delivery is a very visible industry in the platform economy, and therefore can be considered very symbolic of the algorithmic management approach in the platform economy and also beyond the platform economy. It looks like the platform-based food delivery is an industry that is relatively less difficult to organize compared to other types of platform work. And I think therefore organizing this industry for unions might provide a leverage to secure regulation in other parts of the platform economy. So organizing careers might help unions as well to better understand the working conditions and arrangements and practices of the platform economy, and also similar arrangements and practices outside the platform economy. Um, Another advantage for the unions is that the careers have some considerable discursive power. Um, and one way to explain this is that they're working in a relative novel industry, and that their message was very easy to sell to the press and media. And this discursive power of the careers is helping the unions in promoting a public image of being active in the platform economy and engaging with young people who have often a migrant background today. And also exactly this profile of the careers, often being a young student and with a migrant background, is of interest for the unions as well. In the transition from school to work, food delivery might be one of the first jobs for students. And to provide a positive image about unionism is important then when students first encounter unions. Also, it's offering unions an opportunity to inform the careers that their employment terms and conditions should not be accepted as the new normal. When it concerns the careers themselves, I think the benefits of union membership for careers are probably not very different from workers in a conventional economy. Setting minimum standards and regulation regarding employment terms and conditions, and also regarding health and safety via, for instance, collective bargaining or otherwise, is what the unions aim to do. Um, and unions have, of course, as mentioned before, the knowledge and experience in mobilizing and organizing, and also in political advocacy. And then at the more individual level, I think unions can also be helpful for careers with, for instance, interpreting their employment contract and with helping them with tax issues. And this is a real issue given the shifting employment status of the careers. In both countries, unions have been successful in some litigation actions
From Latin America and Europe, we come to Asia, my region, where platform companies providing transport service to the public have expanded rapidly as well. In Indonesia, for example, the massive growth of the ride-hailing platform companies has been accompanied by increasing control of drivers via the app's algorithms.
Gojek in Indonesia alone has 2.5 million drivers in Indonesia, and Grab has like 9 million drivers in Southeast Asia. Like other platform companies, so algorithm has been used to control and to discipline the drivers. Like Melissa said, that in contrast with the company's claim that drivers are free to accept order or not, and they claim that the company claimed that the drivers are micro entrepreneur. So actually, this is wrong. It's not true. Actually, drivers are forced to take order if they want to maintain their status or to get bonus, or if they want to avoid temporary deactivation by the platform companies. So, and as a result, drivers are competing with each other to get the order. And then, the number of drivers are also increasing. Because of these working conditions, many drivers suffer from, different illnesses. We should call this as occupational illnesses or occupational disease, such as the respiratory problems. I'm talking about the majority of platform companies here is motorbike taxi. So the drivers suffer from respiratory problems because of the pollution and hemorrhoid, and not to mention accidents, road accidents, and death. Drivers in Indonesia organize themselves in different forms. At least there are 3 forms of organizing. One is community form, second is association, and the third is union. The most popular form is community because community is very flexible and informal. And then association form is broader than community. It's the members are also community from different areas, and then also individual drivers. It's broader and larger and consists of different provinces. And the third is labor unions, driver union. Of course, this is the most advantage for drivers if they want to change policies. They have legal recognitions because they have registered in the governments. They can also run legal battle, also advocacy. But again, the challenge are exactly the power they have. It's the denial of this status as a registered union, as legal institutions. A denial or negligence from the platform companies as well as the government. But as I said, they successfully registered one union, driver union. This is a victory, I think, and this can be advanced for the future. And of course, advantage for the drivers if they join the trade unions or labor unions or driver unions, the solidarity and the direct support from fellow workers in other sectors. They can also influence policy because they are recognized, they are legal. they can bring the cases to labor court, for example. They can negotiate. I think the established unions, because they are industrial unions, they need to be flexible. They have to see the reality of, the drivers on the road. They prefer flexibility and informality in terms of organizations. In terms of regulations that have been influenced, I think there are some of the regulations. For example, the regulation about the legality of the drivers. Of course, this is debatable because the indigenous transport drivers oppose these regulations. They compete with the platform drivers, but at least the existing or the new regulation that being produced because of the pressure by the drivers, communities and associations that involve in the decision-making process, at least the regulations that protect the platform drivers from from the accidents, the regulation that protect them from road accidents and equipments that should be provided by the platform, things like that. At least this is a few regulations that's towards driver protections. Of course, this is still not enough because this is still, in the lens of transportations and still far from what the drivers demanded about the labor rights, about the driver rights. In Indonesian context, this is only involving transportation ministry or authority, and the labor or the workers ministry, they are still not taking any actions into this. So I think the path is still far, and the drivers are still trying to push the labor ministry to consider the drivers as labor, and they entitled to the labor rights.
We've been hearing very interesting experiences from Latin America, Europe, Asia, and now we are going to Africa just to discuss a bit more about the platform economy and the ways workers are organizing in the middle of these transformations. Your story is really, really interesting because it involves mass associations of informal boda motorcycle workers and also airport taxi drivers to integrating them into an established trade union, the Amalgamated Transport and General Workers Union. You use also apps in this process of organization. So now I was willing to invite you to discuss a little bit what were the factors that led these associations of informal workers to integrate fully into the structures of this pre-existing union?
There are many factors that led to the association of informal transport workers to integrate fully into the structure of the main union, but I will zero in to around 4 or 5. The first necessary condition is the realization or recognition by both ATAGU, the union, the main union, and informal transport workers association, that they needed to revitalize in order to remain relevant amid many challenges. On the part of the ATAGU, the main union, on the one hand, realized that it was a union with both residual institutional power, but declining associational power due to decline in membership. And that is appreciated in the study that because of the advent of multinationals and the neoliberalism, kind of had a negative impact on formal workers and kind of informalized the sector. So that was the recognition itself is important on the part of Informal Transport Workers Association. On the other hand, they had the structural power, the associational power, but lacked the institutional power, among other capabilities are required to overcome challenges like what I've mentioned, the entry of multinational in the public transport sector in Kampala, Uganda. So the recognition is the first step that has to be appreciated. So the main union, ATAGU, played a key role in constantly assuring them, intermediating whenever there were challenges, and that really built some sense of trust and confidence. Then there was this element of capacity building. Each association had its weakness and strength. Some were more knowledgeable about union matters, others were not more knowledgeable. So the capacity building process played a key role in strengthening them, identifying areas of weakness and strengthening them so that they are able to, engage. These trainings from the study, played a key role in building trust and confidence among informal workers association. And the consultative processes also provided democratic spaces for members to articulate their views freely, raise concerns, and those concerns would be discussed. There were internal reforms that were also very instrumental in enhancing full integration. A case in point is the review of the Constitution. For instance, the reforms abolished the issue of formal and informal membership categories. That dichotomy was problematic. The informal workers never wanted to be, referred to as associates or informal members. But that review of the Constitution addressed this particular issue. They became full members with equal rights, including the right to elect and the right to be elected as a Secretary General of the main union. There are advantages and disadvantages in this absorption of informal workers under ATAGU. The advantages are manifold. One, based on the study findings, absorptions lead to more membership in ATAGU, which presents opportunities to mobilize additional resources, which unions require to execute their mandate and support other activities in a robust manner. Our argument is that a union which depends on internally generated resources stands a better chance to exercise its voice in an authoritative and objective manner with a high possibility of eliciting response from powers that be. The second advantage as captured in the study is that absorption enabled associations of informal transport workers to improve the working condition of their members. And for example, addressing issues such as sexual harassment, which had been raised by female members. Three, we argue that these consultative spaces provided participants with opportunity to acquire new knowledge and skills, and for example, the art of negotiation with employers. One of the last advantages that women and youth were able to substantially push the agenda due to the internal reforms that were provided for. And some of these spaces were really institutionalized, to give them leverage and to be able to articulate their views compared to the previous situation. When you look at it from organizing unions or members, it reduces the transaction cost of organizing members, especially in the informal setup, which is a dominant feature of public transport in many countries, especially sub-Saharan Africa. So it reduces the process. It gives an opportunity for these guys who are scattered, to interact within a particular, it provides that focal point. And as stated, earlier, the platform provides opportunity, to mobilize resources from informal sector. And I think that is one of the challenges facing unions. How do you really mobilize resources in an informal setup? So it provides that opportunity. People members are able to submit their contributions through the app. And lastly, I would say that concerns of members can be easily presented for deliberation on a real-time basis with the view of finding solutions. So that if you look at our study, there were challenges because this investment is quite capital intensive. There were things that were not foreseen. So the extent to which it will, the fact that they are able to compete with the multinational is itself an advantage. But whether it will be perfect, some of these challenges will emerge with the time. And at the end of the day, I think, some of these challenges will be addressed. But the overall statement I would say is that it will depend on the kind of technology, the kind of investment strategy. If you adopt a high cost technology, then it can eat into the potential benefits. So some of these things will come out clearly with time. But the taxi operators at the airport are doing pretty well.
Now we are going back to Asia, which, similar to the Uganda case, we see there owner-operated freight truck drivers in South Korea overcoming the organizational limitations of the independent contractor classification by forming themselves into a special unit called Independent Drivers Solidarity. My question would be, how have the technological and digital innovations in the transport and logistics sectors impacted on the working conditions and existing power resources of freight truck drivers, which are immersed in subcontracting, no? Which is, we know it's a very, very difficult challenge.
The Korean road freight transport sector is characterized by multi-layered subcontracting. At the top of that, giant transport buyers exist. Most road hauliers do not have vehicles and merely function as intermediaries. At the bottom, owner drivers who account for over 90% of all truck drivers suffer from poor working conditions and exclusion from labor protection. So since 2002, owner drivers organized a special branch under the existing trade union, and they are called the Cargo Truckers Solidarity Union, TruckSol. The union utilized their structural power resource by disrupting logistics of export goods and achieved agreements with governments as well as companies. Nevertheless, the union failed in achieving institutional power as government and employers kept denying the employee status to the owner drivers. Furthermore, the development of e-commerce have brought about an expansion of new sectors such as door-to-door delivery services. For example, traffic volumes of parcel delivery services increased about threefold over the past 10 years. But this emerging sector had scarcely been organized into trade unions. Also, with technical advancement, the transport buyers, such as giant retailers, have a decisive power to set rates and times taken to deliver goods. You can see here the GPS and the digital application which retailers set and monitor operation time of owner drivers delivering their goods. And another, the technical advancement, for example, the Korea's biggest e-commerce firms named Coupang uses over 4,000 non-professional delivery workers on a daily basis. These workers use their own vehicles and compete for getting the carriage on one-day contract via applications. Delivery fees are decided by coupon on a daily basis and have decreased due to increasing competition among workers. These workers are excluded from labor protections. So to respond these technical changes, the Truxell Union has developed the Safe Rates campaign since 2006. The union demands the minimum standards of rates for all drivers, including owner drivers. Truxell, inspired by TW Australia's campaign, gathering evidence of how low rates led to increased driver fatigue and accident risk, and organizing rallies and demonstrations and strikes and becoming active in the public. So as a result, the union achieved new legislation on safe rates in 2017, and this new law can hold on supply chain actors and sectors accountable for minimum rates for owner drivers. Through these safe race campaigns, the Truxell unions can organize and increase its membership by the almost 50% in the 3 years. And it also increase the social power resources of the unions and the owner drivers, because they are the making a linkage from between their own demands and the public the safety issues. But still, the much remains to be done to both expand the scope of safe rates, because this legislation application of this the new law is very limited to the small section of the road freight transport sector, and also the unions should organize more transport workers in order to conclude agreement with the big the transport buyers and the big transport companies, and to make the enforce these safe rates the at the bottom. And also they have to defend this safety law, because the some transport companies file the legal suit against this safety the race the campaigns. In Korea also we have the legal definition of employer and employee, and this is based on the very traditional subordination from one employer to the particular employee. But we are seeing the another the type of the subordinate workers, not only employees. For example, the platform worker, if we see the platform worker, there are the several employers, or there are also the cascade subcontracting. So there are the prime the employer, and the subcontractor is also could be seen as an employer, and also the workers are very dependent on the economic employer. So in Korean case, the trade unions tried to organize workers beyond this traditional employment relationship. And so we are trying to expand the concept of workers, especially who are entitled to the right of the freedom of association, and to right to organize, and to right to collective bargaining. So in my view, the trade unions should take the initiatives to expand the scope of the employment relationship, or the scope of workers who should be entitled to the right to organize, or the right to collective bargaining. Not the only the limiting in the traditional employment relationship. Would like to the about the identity of these emerging the workers. For example, the Korean owner operators were originally having very individualistic the attitude, especially they were competing each other for getting jobs, getting the carriages, but through organizing them into trade unions, especially the existing trade unions have provided the many various educational programs to build their identity, and their also the establish their demand into the more broad the labor movement the context. So the safe rates the demands is originated from this effort from the existing the labor movement, the initiatives. This demand is related to overcome competition among the individual the workers. So as for the platform workers, they are also the competing each other for the prices, or their prices for their services. But through the Korean experience, the kind of demands such as the safety, the rates is one very useful the method to the overcome competition and to establish some labor standards for all workers. So minimum or the humane labor standards for the all workers, respective of their employment status, kind of the minimum minimum wages for all workers, including the platform workers. So I think the important task of trade unions is not only organize the self-employed or the platform workers, but also organizing their identity and their demand towards more the working class identity.
I think what would be interesting mentioning is that we had 15% of the global cases where we had a workers' collective involved. So that was the kind of difference between just being a group of workers, was that the collective had a shared collective identity and gave themselves a name. So that was a kind of stepping stone from being an informal group of workers into something more formalized, or maybe the first step before joining the union or establishing a union.
But we do have a great commentator from the ITF, Ingo Marowski, Union Building Director at the ITF. The ITF's union building team purpose is to build strong democratic unions with the capacity to face challenges to transport workers' lives and livelihoods. I wanted to ask you in particular, what lessons and insights can you draw from the cases that may inform and enrich ITF's organizing initiatives in the platform-mediated transport sector?
About 1 million that we learn on a daily basis, but three main elements I would like to highlight. The first is, it is not as simple as we think it is. The example we heard from Eric on our Uganda case shows very clearly that we all went into this with great enthusiasm and were ready to take over the digital world of the country, but it didn't work like this. There was a lot of obstacles that we had to look at and had to overcome to get to the point that Eric just summarized for us. We have a similar issue, and I think it was either Eric or one of the previous speakers mentioned that as well, in India, where we have organized ride-hailing drivers as well. And we ran into the issue that no existing union was ready to organize these workers because their constitution wouldn't allow for that kind of employment situation to be a member of the union. So lesson number 2 is that there are indeed huge, if not endless, opportunities, and none of us, and I think this is a strong call I want to make to all of us in this room, none of us can ignore this. We cannot pretend it'll go away. We will not pretend by tomorrow all societies we live in will have put the legal structure in place to protect gig workers. So we need to take it on, and we can do it. There are opportunities, are endless. And I think the last speaker mentioned that particularly, that the youth of our respective workplaces, the young workers, young men and women, are a strong force to reckon with, because they are not only using, they're not only the ones abused by the system that the system uses to work in these circumstances, but they are also the ones that are the fittest in digital awareness and digital skills to help us on that journey. And I think the last lesson, and this will be the last, I promise, is that it can be done. It is difficult, it is everywhere, it is huge, but it can be done. We just need to get it right. And for us as a global union federation, as ITF across the globe, we are working at best with 600 of our affiliated unions, which I hope will never happen because I probably couldn't handle this impact of work. This is a global issue, this is a global challenge, and it can only be resolved on the national level. So that link has to be forged. And for us as ITF, and I'm sure for many of my colleagues in the other global federations, it is great to do this work with a global partner such as Friedrich Ebert, FES. So thank you